For a lot of data teams, their biggest costs come from something that's right in front of them. And when you think about costs, you might first lean towards licenses or compute. But what actually happens is the biggest cost of all tends to come from maintenance and the total human resource expense of keeping everything running. And one of the places where this tends to creep up is in the data ingestion process at the very start of the pipeline. So in this video, we're going to talk about the importance of this layer in an overall architecture, an example cost breakdown showing the impact of this maintenance cost, and then review some of the common options that you have for managing it. Speaking of which, one of those options and a leader in this area is a company called Fivetran. They have a platform I've personally used many times in the past, and they're also the sponsor of today's video. So to set the stage here at a high level, I think about data architecture from left to right. You have your data sources all the way in the left and your consumers or outputs all the way in the right. But nowadays, those consumers don't just include internal business stakeholders like we're used to. It now more increasingly includes these AI agent operations as well. And whether or not you do use AI in that way today, having your data landed and structured properly from the start is incredibly important to the ultimate success that you're going to have with your data at all. Number one, it's going to set the tone for how the rest of your architecture is going to flow. If your data isn't organized and easy to access from the start, it's just going to make the rest of your life very difficult as a data engineer. And this is especially true for those smaller teams who have limited resources already, but still have big ambitions for using their data. You'll find yourself spending a lot of time wrestling with APIs, fixing formats, and a whole bunch of other stuff just to get it to the point where you can finally actually do something with it. Number two, and probably most important of all, it establishes trust. As data engineers, it's critical that our stakeholders feel confident that the data we're providing to them is accurate and it's up to date. And if you do have plans to connect that data to other agents and AI tools, it's even more important that it's reliable and it's going to be there when you expect it. If there happen to be any issues along the way, there needs to be systems in place so that you know about it immediately and can take action on it. Because once you lose that trust, it's extremely hard to get it back. I've come across many data teams over the years where they've just lost the trust of the business and they have to spend all their time trying to make it up to them versus actually innovating and moving forward with their data. Number three, it unlocks your ability to scale more with your data. You can only go as fast as your slowest component. So if data ingestion is slowing you down or you're spending all of your time fixing issues, it's going to naturally impact your ability to do more with your data. And the idea here isn't to just say that you should have more data for the sake of it, but unlocking this process and smoothing it out is going to allow you to more easily add new sources in the future, which can then provide new insights to the business and connect new AI agents or tools in new ways. The interconnectivity of all of your systems and data is more important than ever nowadays. And so your ability to capture and structure that from the start in an efficient manner is more important than ever. Before we get more into this total cost of ownership discussion, let's review some of the common approaches to handling this ingestion component. If you're like me, you've probably experienced all of these at some point in your career, but number one is the classic DIY, do-it-yourself approach. You custom create everything from scratch and run it on your own infrastructure. This could be custom Python scripts or other languages that you know that you can use to connect directly to your database, to APIs, or other sources that you have. And it might be something that you've personally built yourself, or maybe along with an AI coding assistant more recently. Or if you're one of the lucky ones, you might have inherited something that somebody else built 10, 20 years ago, but now nobody wants to touch. Number two is the open source route. This is where instead of customizing everything yourself from scratch, you tap into an established framework or tool that offers the ability to use it without paying for licensing. This can be a great option if you have the technical experience and are comfortable managing your own infrastructure as well. This route gives you much better structure compared to the fully custom DIY route, and you also get the support from usually a larger community using the same framework. Having said that, you'll still be responsible for keeping track of updates, managing things like networking, keeping an eye on security, and just other general infrastructure needs. And then number three is the managed cloud offering. This is where the infrastructure is going to be abstracted away and you can effectively just outsource that responsibility. You won't have to reinvent the wheel for every new API or go through solving schema changes all on your own. Instead, you go log into a site, add your configurations through some sort of interface, and then set it to run on a schedule. You also typically get additional features that give you more functionality not available in the open source version, along with more personalized, dedicated customer support. Generally speaking, this often provides the best experience with the least amount of overhead, but it does come at the cost of licenses, compute costs, and sometimes some flexibility. There are several great tools and platforms that offer everything on the spectrum here, and ultimately it'll come down to what makes the most sense for you, which is something we'll talk about a little later in this video. Now that we've talked about the common approaches, let's now go into more on the total cost of ownership, and more specifically why your time or the time of other engineers on your team is actually the biggest cost of them all. To help show this concept, I'm going to go through this calculator here, which helps break down the total cost of ownership for specifically the data ingestion component. So step one is selecting your company size. For a lot of small data teams, they're in the range of 1 to 200. Maybe the company is up to 2,000 people, but let's just keep it here for the sake of example. Step 2 is adjusting some of the more specific values. Most importantly here is going to be the average salary for whoever's on your team. Maybe it's just you, or maybe you have a few people on the team. We'll keep it at $120,000 per year. This is going to be the fully loaded annual salary, so you could assume that this includes benefits, bonuses, time off, all of that other stuff. And this is a common US benchmark at the time of this recording for a mid-level data engineer. Again, it might be different based on where you live, your experience, all that stuff. But for sake of example, we'll just stick with this, which leaves us at around $62.5 per hour. Next is the number of data sources. I think 5 is a pretty reasonable number for most data teams that I've seen. Next, we have the time to build each connection. Imagine you're starting from scratch, you're doing it all on your own. How long would that take you to create a custom connector? Maybe it's 80 hours, maybe it's half that time. I don't know. It depends on your skill set and your team, but let's actually just cut it in half just for sake of example here. Next, we have schema change maintenance, and this is the time that you're spent fixing pipelines due to schema changes or API updates. Obviously, some weeks will be more than others. If there's a big schema or API change, this could take up a lot of your time, but on average, we're going to say 2 hours per week. That's less than an hour a day throughout the entire year. I think that's pretty reasonable. Next is estimated data downtime, and this has to do with when your data pipelines are down or delayed. Sometimes it's for no reason at all. If you've ever worked on a team and you just walk in and it just happens to randomly stop working, or maybe you're just spending your time waiting for somebody else to do something because of the way it's been designed. All of that together, again, we're just taking an average for the whole year. So let's assume less than a quarter of an hour for the whole week, but the cost of that obviously is impactful for the business. If there's no access to data, they can't make decisions. They're kind of on a standstill for what can be done. And this is going to vary drastically based on how you're using your data. This is saying 5,000. Let's just go less. Let's cut it down to 2,500. Let's assume, again, this is a small data team, a smaller company, but they are starting to use data more often. Then lastly, we have additional costs. This could be anything else related to a data pipeline infrastructure. So maybe you're self-hosting your infrastructure, you have manual processing not already captured, whatever that is. Let's just group this in and say just another 2,500 here. So if we look at the total costs over here, we can see for this case, it's $54,000 annually. And again, this is assuming some pretty conservative numbers and putting the defaults here, we're back up to almost $100,000. You bump the salary a little bit and that's going to put you over the 6-figure mark. But obviously this is going to depend based on what you're working on. Let's just bring this back down to what we had it at. And the point is not to say that these numbers are perfectly going to align with your situation. Yours could be different, but hopefully this is helping you see that there is a very real cost to your time and to these decisions. So as you can see, when talking about total ownership in the data ingestion space, it does include a handful of things that we covered. Things like building and setting up your connectors, keeping up with schema changes, networking, infrastructure, security. But it's also not just about that cost itself. It's about the opportunity cost of what that time could have been used for instead. Because everything here is a trade-off. There are no free lunches. For example, what if you spent those few hundred hours throughout the year to focus instead on delivering better insights or leveraging AI in new ways or becoming more efficient in just other areas of the business? It's not to say that there is universally one right decision, but the point of this whole exercise is just to point out that it should always be a consideration for you, for your data team, and for the business. Don't allow it to become this hidden cost that comes back to bite you because you weren't paying attention. And again, I say this because I think this is especially important as a smaller team when your time is truly limited and it's so easy to get overwhelmed with everything else already on your plate. Now, getting back to those different approaches that we talked about earlier, if you're somebody who is comfortable with the self-hosting and going the more custom or open source route, then that's great. And honestly, I've seen that work out really well for many teams where it does align properly with their skill set and what their team is capable of. But if you're on the other end of that, where the custom ownership and development of those connectors and the whole data ingestion process isn't really the best use of your time or in your wheelhouse, or you just want to take advantage of the best and most updated features available, then a cloud hosted platform is a great option to consider. And one of those options that I've personally worked with many times in the past and have recommended to clients is Fivetran. So in case you're not familiar with their platform, what I'll do now is give a quick walkthrough of how it works and some of the core concepts. So here I am on the Fivetran dashboard, and what I'm going to show you how to do is load data from a PostgreSQL database and land it in a Snowflake database. So let's go through the steps here. I'm going to click select connector, and in this case, I'll type in Postgres. There's a bunch of options, and in my case, it's a PostgreSQL instance on Google Cloud SQL, so I'm going to set this up. Now, obviously, this will look slightly different for different sources. Maybe you're using Salesforce, HubSpot, or some other connector that's not Postgres, but the concept and approach is still the same. You're going to get a clean interface with different places to put in configurations, select different options, and they're dealing with all the nuances with how that connection works. Again, Postgres is a very simple example, but imagine some of these other connectors where that can get pretty tricky. It's already handled for you. In this case, you can see I already have my Snowflake database already set up, and it's recognizing my warehouse. And I'll also show this Snowflake setup before we're finished here. The next item in this case is the destination schema prefix, and this comes into play more if you have multiple schemas that you're loading from the same source. So imagine I had 3 or 4 different schemas in this database that I wanted to load. When it loads it into the destination Snowflake in my example, each of those schemas still get grouped together by this prefix. So the source stays together and they just get prefixed rather than getting lost in the shuffle. Then we have some more options for the destination names of how you want the source schema table and columns to look in the destination. I'm going to keep it as the source. Next, I'll fill in the typical Postgres connection information, the IP address, the user, password, etc. You select the authentication method. In my case, I'm sticking with username and password, and I don't have the logical replication set up, so I'm going to do the query base just to keep it simple. And then the last item in this case is making sure that we have the Fivetran IPs safe listed on the server itself, on the Postgres server, so that it can access it. And I've already handled this on my end, but this is something you would need to just configure quickly on your end. It's pretty straightforward. And the last item is to now just test. And all checks pass. Love to see the green check mark. So let's go ahead and continue. And what it's doing now is fetching the source schema. So it's going to understand what's available for us to actually load it. And here we can see it picked up one schema with 10 different tables. And if you look on the right here, there are additional options as well. If you wanted to filter the data right from here, maybe you have some custom logic for filtering things out. You also have the option to hash some columns. So perhaps there's some confidential data that you don't want actually loaded into your warehouse. You could have it hashed here instead so that it does populate the column, but it's just hash values. There's no actual real data passed through there. So we have a handful of options here. For now, let's go. I'm going to click save and continue. It's off the screen, but I'm going to click save and continue. Next up, it's asking how would we like to handle the changes? And it's saying your schema may change in the future. And this is something that might seem pretty easy because we're just clicking a button, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes here. And if you've ever worked with handling schema changes with any sort of data, it can be really frustrating and very complex. But this allows you to simply handle that through the click of a button. In this case, I'm just going to allow all changes and click continue. All right, so we're all set up. We have a default sync frequency, meaning it's going to extract and load that every 6 hours, but we can obviously change that. And it's going to load it into my Snowflake database. What I'm going to do is click on this warehouse here, and this is the destination. So every Fivetran account, you need some sort of destination. There's really no point to using this if you're not actually loading it somewhere. So where are you putting it? In this case, I've set up a Snowflake instance, and I'll just click edit to show some information here. So in this case, I have a dedicated Fivetran user, a database where it's loading, a raw database, and a key value pair. I've also established a role and a specific warehouse. So these are things that you would want to set up as well. And I can show you over here, I just have this demo raw database, and we're just going to load it in here and see what happens. So let's go back to this overview, and we can see we are ready to go, and it's saying, hey, go ahead and start your initial sync. So I'm going to click start initial sync, and it's going to take that data and load it into my database over here. So it's going to go ahead and do that. So while it's going through this process, one of the topics we can talk about is what's right in the middle here, which is the monthly active rows. And we can see that the initial syncs do not count towards your monthly active rows. So let's click what are monthly active rows. Essentially, this is the primary billing metric used by Fivetran. And what it means is it's tracking the unique rows of data synced in a given month. And what's important to understand is a row is only counted towards being an active row if it's new, changed, or deleted, which means that if a row is just reloaded, but it's not actually changed from the previous month, it's not considered active. Let's actually look at an example. Here we can see the initial load was 3 different records, 0 MAR. Just like we saw before, that initial historical sync doesn't count towards this. But let's say the next day, value A changed, value D was inserted, but B and C, nothing changed with that. In this case, it only counted 2 records to the monthly active row, not all 4, because it's not how many total records were there, it's only what was changed. Then let's say again later on May 5th, row D was updated their value from 4 to 5. That's considered an update. None of the other ones changed, so it's just one active row. And this is billed monthly, so it'll tally this up for the month, and that'll be your monthly active rows for the month that is billed. And so there's a little more information here on why they do this, the different types of monthly active rows, and what your cost could look like. So if you're still curious about this, there's a ton of information. This is something for a while, I think, confused people, but now there's a lot more documentation and clarity on what that means. But with that said, let's go back to the overview. We can see it did load the initial source, so let's go back to Snowflake Snowflake here. I'm going to refresh this. And now we can see the schema app was loaded. And this was that one schema that we had here. So if I go back to the schema here, app was the name of that schema. And that's exactly what was loaded here with all of the tables. And we can see all of this data is now living here. So if we go back here to connections, you can see very clearly down here the schema changes, the MAR, the sync frequency, everything you need to track it. And as you have more and more sources, this will be a little bit longer, but you can star some of them. You can filter to make sure it's very easy to use and all right in front of you. But one of the cool things about Fivetran is the fact that it is expanding across the data stack. So it's not just data ingestion and getting your data loaded. You can now complete additional functionality here. For example, transformations. You can handle this directly from here to build and orchestrate the rest of your transformations, integrated directly with a Git repository to run DBT models. And speaking of DBT, at the time of this recording, it's fairly recent that they've officially merged into a single company. And here you can see an article that talks about a clear vision here for what they foresee as the future of data engineering, in particular what they're referring to as the open data infrastructure. And so you have the ability in one place to not only load your data and get it ready to serve up, like we said, to different consumers, to AI agents, but use DBT on top of it to create that more semantic layer to bring meaning to that data. So there's a lot of great things happening with these two companies, and I'm personally very much looking forward to see how it continues to evolve over time. And then lastly, there's also the new section of activations. You may have heard this referred to as reverse ETL in the past. This is effectively taking your data from your data warehouse and then pushing it back to the business application. So you go through the process of cleaning things up, getting it in a nice structured format, and then moving that data back into the business applications themselves that you're using every day, that your business stakeholders work with, rather than it being on a report or something else. So this is really a great use case of actually putting your data to use in your business applications. And again, with Fivetran, it's all under one hood now. We have the data loading, the data transformation, and the reverse ETL with activations, all while staying prepared and ready for AI as it continues to evolve in the future with new technologies and best practices. So if you're leaning towards a cloud managed approach, then Fivetran is a great option to consider. But at the end of the day, there's no universal perfect or right decision. It's up to you to understand what makes the most sense for you and your team. So to finish up, here are a few things I would consider as you're thinking through this process and deciding how to handle this data ingestion component of your architecture. Number one is really understanding where the competitive advantage is for your business. If there is truly a competitive advantage to you custom building an ingestion process, then it makes sense for you to go more custom or open source as opposed to leaning on a cloud hosted platform. For example, you have logic to set up some very custom or proprietary connectors that won't be available in other frameworks or cloud providers. So you truly have the advantage because of your ability to access it in some custom way. For many of the teams I work with, that's usually not the case, but it's not to say that it couldn't be for you. Number two is if the company or you simply prioritize open source. I have worked with several teams where they very much lean open source first. They prioritize control and flexibility and would rather take on the ownership rather than outsource to a hosted platform. And number three, you might actually just have the extra bandwidth to design and manage it internally. Maybe you have a very simple setup and managing those responsibilities isn't as overwhelming or time consuming as we spoke about. So you're able to more easily own it all yourself without it becoming a huge time factor. Now, on the other hand, as you've seen, using a hosted platform can be a much simpler option and provide more functionality without the overhead of you or your team's time on the infrastructure side. So this might make more sense for you if you don't want to deal with the things we said, like changing APIs, connector logic, or simply just managing a code base on your own. Maybe instead you prefer the more plug and play, out of the box access to common data sources through an interface as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel or manage the logic yourself. Or finally, you just want something that's easy to use, and ultimately that's what's most important to you. You'll get best in class functionality, customer service, and everything else that comes with a cloud hosted tool. So to recap, data ingestion is one of the most critical components of any good architecture. Getting it right helps you establish a culture of trustworthy data from the very start, and it'll set up new opportunities for you to use your data in new ways, especially in this new era of AI and AI agents. There are multiple options out there for you to choose from, and hopefully this video helped give you a better idea of things to consider as you go about that. I want to again say thank you to Fivetran for sponsoring today's video, and if you'd like to learn more about them and how they could fit into your infrastructure, I'll leave a link below where you can learn more. But as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you at the next video.